Hello, my name is Hannah, and today I'm going to be talking about the Shadow and Bone TV show. It just came out last week, and I watched the show all the way through 3 times in the last week, which is excessive, but I had my reasons. So the first watch through was literally just like a feverish trying to watch it so nothing got spoiled at all. I woke up at 5 a.m., watched an episode and a half, went to work, finished the second episode over lunch, and then after work, I binged through the rest of the 6 episodes. Then, over the course of the weekend was like kind of my actual watch through where I noticed more stuff, had opinions on things, and then my third watch through came midway through the week. One of my roommates expressed an interest in watching it, and I was like, you know what, I'll watch it again, and this time I'll take notes. So this set of notes that I have here on my laptop are my notes from my third watch through. So basically I'm gonna go episode by episode, and then at the end I have kind of like my thoughts and opinions overall. Oh yeah, and I'm going to be spoiling the whole show. I'm going to be talking about all of the Shadow and Bone books and some spoiler stuff from the Six of Crows books as well. So those 5 books, these 8 hours of TV, consider it spoiled. So episode 1, A Searing Burst of Light. Just right off the bat, the exposition at the very beginning is so funny upon any amount of rewatch, because it's like, Mal's not scared of anything. Mal, you know, the tracker. Like, also, I think it is unspeakably funny that one of the very first lines of dialogue in this show is just, the fold ate your parents. And right off the bat, I want to talk about the Mal changes, because I think they're really interesting. I like Mal in the books. I think he has a really full arc. You know, he starts off very like a little shit, basically, and he really grows over the course of this series, becomes more mature and a lot more accepting of Alina. I just think it's interesting is the word I'll stick with. I'll touch more on the Mal changes later, but just say for now, I think they're really interesting, but I think they might ultimately kind of be like a net neutral for the show. I'm also really quick, I'm going to be peppering in my opinions on the casting throughout. I love Archie and Jesse. They're so perfect in their roles. And I had the benefit of, I didn't read the Shadow and Bone books until like the cast had already been announced when I read the books. So I didn't have to like stretch my imagination too much for them. I also want to talk about the choice to portray racism in the world of Shadow and Bone. I think it was a really strong choice. I think it really gives weight to Alina's sense of like alienation and being othered and feeling like she doesn't fit in, instead of just this kind of YA, like, oh, she's kind of sick and she just doesn't fit in. Like, it gives that like a real feeling and real stakes. Dubrov and Mikhail are so fun. Like, I know sometimes the Shadow and Bone portions can just feel like so heavy and so serious that it's really nice to have those two around, even when they get iced. All right, then we meet the Crows, and I have some thoughts on the Crows. Casting wise, for some reason, when I read these books a couple years ago, I just like could not visualize any of these people. Like, I could not think of an actor that I knew of that reminded me of any of them. Like, Inej, for some reason, I thought she had short hair, even though in the books they definitely talk about her having long hair and having a braid. There was just something about short dark hair and, you know, very sneaky and athletic and like a spy that I could only visualize Alex from Totally Spies when I pictured Inej. I don't know why. Kit Young as Jesper is so great. All this talk of understanding assignments, he understands the assignment completely. He's so fun, so funny without being like stuck in an elevator with Deadpool type of funny. Also, Jesper calling Kaz boss is really funny to me. As far as Kaz is such a complicated character, and even in the books, we only really see anything about him piecemeal over the course of 2 whole books. So I just feel like something about Kaz isn't quite locking into place yet. And it's not poor writing. It's certainly not anything on Freddie Carter's part. I just think we're getting a vague sense of him. Like, we see that he always wears the gloves. He takes them off once around Inej, but no one else. When he asks Pekka Rollins if they've ever made a deal before. Like, so we're getting, like, breadcrumbs. I just think it's not quite locked into place yet. And it shouldn't be locked into place yet because we haven't even gotten to the events of the books where we actually find stuff out about him. And speaking of Pekka Rollins himself, his scenes are really good. They're really good. Like, even like when my roommates would be walking through the room while I was watching it, they would kind of like sit and like listen, like perk up and listen when Pekka Rollins was like interrogating people. The actor who played him, his name is Dean Lennox Kelly, and he's so good. Like, these scenes literally feel like they're from like Peaky Blinders or something. He's just, there's something so mesmerizing about his scenes that it's like, ooh, this guy is like dark in a bad way. I also liked that they kind of fuzzed the timeline up a little at the beginning because they were like, we need to get the crows rolling. We need to get this started. So like how Alexei ran out of the fold and 2 weeks later is in Kerch getting interrogated. Also is just really brutal that it's like, wow, Alexei survived the fold. Oh my gosh. And then 15 minutes later, he does die. All right, then we go back to Shadow and Bone events, and we meet Zoya, who is like most interesting woman alive award. I like that we meet her and she immediately seems important beyond just like, this chick is a rock in Alina's shoe for a while. Because that's kind of how I read her at the beginning of the books, is like, she's just like a bitch who's around a lot. I have just started reading King of Scars, and Zoya is obviously very important in that book, so I'm curious to see where that's going. Also, I think the decision for Mal and Zoya to not hook up at the beginning is kind of a non-decision. It's interesting, but I don't think it does anything to the plot at all. When they actually go to the fold looks so cool. I had no clue how to visualize it while I was reading, but it was just kind of like, I just pictured like smoke, and I was like, it's like smoke, but it's not. It was very cool. I love the lightning. I love that it was like silent inside. That really was super unnerving. I loved it. The whole scene, the first time they go into the fold, is great. It's perfect. No notes. General Zlatan, really interesting choice. First of all, every time they said Zlatan, I was like, Zlatan? I think that's really kind of simplifies this Ravkin Civil War idea. I think he makes for like really useful shorthand that way. So it's like, it can boil down to this one guy, you know, later on when Arkin's allegiances are not correct, it makes it so much simpler and so much more straightforward that it's like, oh, this one guy can symbolize all this complicated political stuff that's happening. But that is going to be interesting going forward, because like the Ravkin Civil War does happen, and it happens differently. We'll see. All right, episode 2, We're All Someone's Monster. Zoya, once again, she's just a bitch. I really like that. I'm already over at this point the flashbacks to the Meadow. I get it. You don't need to keep telling me. As just kind of a general point in this show, the flashbacks are doing far too much. Like, you don't need to remind me of something that happened 25 minutes of screen time ago. Right, and then we meet the Darkling. It's so funny seeing all of the ways that the Darkling is described in the book visually, because he's just like almost cartoonishly villainous, and it was such a good idea to not call him the Darkling, because that's just too much. It's like, yeah, this guy, he swans around in a black cloak, in a black carriage pulled by big black horses, and they go back to his castle in his all black bedroom. It's like, are you trying to tell me something about this guy, Lee Bardugo? I can't really tell. Also, I am not completely remembering how they do the Grisha test in the books, but it literally looks like the Gom Jabbar from Dune. which is a little bit like the Grisha test in Dune, honestly. Mal in this episode, man, the Gale Hawthorne vibes that he is giving off here are just horrific right at the beginning. I'm also not completely sure what he means when he says, what will they do to her when they realize she's not Grisha? I'm like, honestly, they'll probably just put her back with wouldn't they probably just send her back to the map makers? Like, they'd be like, that was weird. Anyways, it probably wasn't you who did that then. Bye. Like, would they kill her? What is he talking about there? Also, on a rewatch, hearing that sound that Mal talks about at the end of the show when he's outside the tent and he sees the light, that's really fun. It's very subtle, almost too subtle, but it's good. Right, and then we go back to Ketterdam, and when the Dime Lions show up to kind of shake Kaz down. Ooh. First of all, the Dime Lions all wearing stupid hats. What an interesting decision. And I like that fight scene was very short in a realistic way, because it's like one Kaz versus several Dime Lions, and they beat him up a realistic amount. So we got some really good hits in, but he did not win that fight at all. And speaking of Kaz getting some hits in, the cane. I hate the cane. I think it looks so dumb. I think it looks like something from Spirit Halloween. It looks like something that a mid-tier cosplayer just spray painted gold. It looks so ostentatious and goofy, and I don't like the cane. I love that he has the cane. I love the idea of the cane. I don't like how it looks. And for that matter, everything about the crows in this show feels slightly goofy. And maybe that's just because I'm like a fun sucker and I'm like, this has to be completely serious the whole time. I can't really put my finger on it. I think the music might exacerbate it a little. Like, it sounds like BBC Sherlock music every once in a while. When Kaz like signals about the lady counting her money weird, and he looks like he's doing like air traffic control signs, it's a little silly. Speaking of the lady who was counting the money weird, when she was talking about obviously crossing the fold illegally, and she was talking about this guy, took us across the fold. He went by a title, and for a second, I literally thought she was going to say Sturmhond. Like, I was like, wait, what? And then she said the conductor, and then it was, who? Ivan and Fedor, perfect. I like that they're more like characters than just like obstacles for Alina to get around. And like all these kind of tertiary characters come in pairs, which I think is really fun, because you have like Mal's friends, you have the two guards, you have the girls that Alina makes friends with at the small palace. Tanta Helene, not quite there yet for me. She's not totally striking fear. We get a little more later on in the season when Inej is talking about very, very veiled talking about her time working for Tanta Helene. But I think that is, again, everything about the crows that I'm like, this doesn't quite feel done. I'm expecting more later. It'd be weird if everything was fully fleshed out already. The whole scene where the Drusilla attack the Grisha convoy is sick. It's one of my favorite scenes in this whole show, because it shows, like, honestly, the limitations of Grisha power, because off the top of your head, it's like, these people have these, like, impossible gifts that help them in combat. How could they ever not be completely winning their hundreds of years long war? And then the first army guy later on in the episode actually makes a very salient point about like Grisha basically becoming like outmoded as like the repeating rifle gets introduced and widely used. I think that's a really good point and kind of adds to that anxiety maybe that the Darkling is feeling. I'm also not entirely sure why Alina lies about how she didn't get tested. Like, she just says that she didn't get tested. She doesn't say that she took the test, flubbed it on purpose. Because I'm like, I just don't know what the advantage to that would be. Besides maybe that she's just still in denial at this point, but that's probably it. This is also the episode, it didn't slip by me, I don't think it slipped by anyone, where Jesper insists to Kaz that they need a demolitions man, which is like, you do need a demolitions man. We also get some new flavor with Inej, and basically her like motivation. She has a brother who's just in the wind somewhere, and I kind of understand that need to like almost construct a slightly different motivation for Inej, because she spends, a lot of the Six of Crows books wanting to, make enough money to pay off her indenture, get a ship, go to Ravka, find her parents. And in this, they just are like, and we are going to Ravka now, and we are crossing the fold now. So yeah, I hope that this whole prequel thing doesn't futz with Inej's arc too much. Because I mean, and I'll talk about it again at the very end, but the jewel thing from Alina's hairpiece, I'm going to talk about that more later. Now, episode 3, The Making at the Heart of the World. First off, Genya. Love her. I also completely was saying her name wrong. I was saying Genya. It's Genya. Oops. Perfect, no notes. She's the perfect amount of like kind of real gal pal for Alina to trust. She's, yeah, pitch perfect. Very loyal to the book, honestly, in Jenny's characterization, which is good here. This is also the episode where we meet Nina, who I love. Nina, again, all of the crows, I just could not visualize this girl whatsoever. I know a lot of people are upset about the casting of Danielle Galligan. I don't have an opinion one way or another, because it was never explicitly stated in the book that Nina is fat. It was only Leigh Bardugo kind of editorializing on Twitter. But yeah, I saw a really interesting point someone made online that was like, that's why explicit in-text representation is really important, because otherwise something like this can happen. Also, when Nina gets taken by the Fjerdans, I thought they were all Druskala, but then later they say like, oh, they had a Druskala with them. So I think they're just like garden variety Fjerdans. Because also one of them was wearing a wolf pelt, and I was like, now hold on a second, isn't that like a whole thing? But maybe there's like more lore to it than I'm realizing. Then we go to the demonstration scene back in Ravka, and that whole scene is also just sick. It's really cool. It's very well done. I think Vasily not uttering a single word in this season is hilarious. This is the episode with Leigh Bardugo's cameo. I think it is the completely correct amount of cameo for an author to have. No lines, but we do get to see her and be like, that's Leigh Bardugo, but it's not like weird that there's this lady there. So perfect. And then this is something that actually really, really bugged me the more I think about it, is when Zoya is hugging Alina and she says some shit under her breath. I really didn't like how they changed her line, because I'm like, I would rather Zoya just be a bitch. I don't know why Zoya had to say something racist to Alina, because that doesn't seem like it fits with her character at all. So I'm going to ignore that she ever said it. That's going to be my way of coping with this weird decision to make Zoya say something racist when she really would not. And then the goat. I think it's fine. I think they were like, hey, the crows need to have something funny and we need a through line, and also we do need a way for Mal to escape the tent later, so how about a goat? And I'm like, sure, whatever. I'm enough of a killjoy that I'm like, that's really dumb, but also it's fine. We're allowed to have fun. This doesn't all have to be serious. It's fine. More crow stuff. A little more Inej, not backstory, but backstory allusions. I don't know. I feel like they're implying that she has no or next to no memory of her time before the menagerie. Which I'm like, she definitely would. She was like 14. I don't know. I just think that's weird. But again, we have to like kind of retrofit Inej's motivations and her backstory to make sense with the fact that she's literally in Ravka right now. Or no, they're not in Ravka yet. They're going to Ravka. This is also the episode where we meet Matthias. Ooh. This is another character. I was completely saying his name wrong. I was saying Matthias because that is the German pronunciation. And I guess you just assumed they would say it the German way. Again, no concept of what this guy should look like, but just like the description, like, yeah, he's a big guy, big blonde guy. So I'm like, he's either a character from Frozen sprung to life, or he's just like some dude from Wisconsin. And when you know it, they cast a big blonde dude from Wisconsin. Perfect. This episode, again, we're doing way too much with flashbacks. You don't need to show me the thing that I saw last episode. Like, I remember that, but thank you. The train. The train is, again, goofy. I don't love it. I think it's really unrealistic to the world, to the fold, that this just like loud ass train also is in the fold and functionally gets people across. I think that's silly. Also, Jesper has so many cool shots when he's like defending the train from the Volcra, but why is the cool one with like the CGI and the bullet going, the one where he's literally firing a gun point blank into the face of a Volcra that's like 2 feet away from him? That's not him using his cool secret powers. That's him like knowing how to operate a gun. And then we go back to Ravka, back to the Shadow and Bone world for the combat training scene. I love Botkin. I think he's really fun in the book. This is literally his only scene in the show, which makes sense, but it's also like, oh, I like Botkin. The Alina versus Zoya fight is really fun because it does kind of also show that Alina's not like this like wilting flower. She's not like everyone's verbal and physical punching bag. The fact that she literally points at Zoya and goes, I want to fight her. That's really funny. This episode we meet the Apparat as well. I know he's not super important until later, and I think they did a good job of kind of like planting kind of more breadcrumbs as to like, remember this creepy guy, we're gonna need him later. And I like that they didn't go overboard with his creepiness, because I literally expected them to go like full Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. So the fact that it's just like a dude who says creepy stuff but looks like an accountant, perfect. Just the Apparat going like, you have suffered and you will suffer more. Okay, bye. Also, in the book that she sees in the library when she's learning about the amplifiers, am I like totally misreading this, or are there 4 amplifiers there? I just am not sure. Because it's like the 3 animals that we knew of, plus the hand, which I think the implication here is that it's supposed to be the Darkling, but you and I all know that it's Mal. And I'm just trying to remember, like, in the books, when they realized that Mal's an amplifier, did they, like, rule out that the Firebird is an amplifier? Or, like, that is also one and they just ignored it? I don't remember. I read these books like 2 months ago. Literally in the next scene, they're like, well, human amplifiers don't exist. It's like, we literally just saw, you, Alina, literally just saw a picture of a human hand in your magic encyclopedia under the heading amplifier. The food taster is a funny touch. That's the kind of funny flavor I wanted. I think I just wanted Shadow and Bone to be sillier and Six of Crows to be more serious. Also, the letter writing, did they literally run out of footage to play over that? Because it was just like a lot of flashbacks, a really weird long shot of the crows that was like, I know them. Also, we don't actually see the crows getting out of the fold. We just see them like screaming and then sitting, and then we don't see them again until the next episode. All right, then episode 4, Otkazatsya. Yep. At the beginning of the episode, we hear someone singing a song about, I quote, a mighty young captain, something, something, the sea, and I'm just like, Nikolai. A lot of people are also upset in this episode. We learn the real first name of the Darkling, which is Alexander. I don't care. I actually think it makes sense for him to tell her that sooner, because he's still in the kind of phase where he's like drawing her closer, manipulating her, getting her to trust him, and like revealing this little pearl of wisdom about himself would be part of that, I think, to try to like get her emotionally nearer to him. So I think it makes sense, and I think people are unduly upset about that. This is also the episode with the crows doing a little heist, and I think it's so fun. That's what I've wanted for them this whole show. It's great. It's so fun. Jesper tying the bullet to the goat. Okay. Nina's absence being so felt by the Second Army, I think is very interesting. I think it's kind of serves to tie that plot line in a little more, because honestly, Nina and Matthias are really off in their own world for most of this. Matthias going down to the brig because he like wants to know more about Grisha. I think that's very interesting. I think it's fostering emotional intimacy between these two people. I really liked that. And speaking of Matthias, you know, he's like Mr. Principled, and a lot of people think that he's like really boring. And honestly, first time I read the books, he just kind of felt disposable. But then when I read Six of Crows after I read Shadow and Bone, it was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense, and it's so much more compelling knowing about Fjerda, knowing about the witch hunters. So yeah, I think Matthias is one of the most interesting characters in the books because he has like a whole arc. I hope that that all works well in the show, because I feel like that's his character, and his arc would be something that's very easy to mess up. I love Mal's little bar fight scene. I really liked that. I loved Mal having a scar as well, and how they both kind of got their scars like for each other, but not in like a weird self-harm way. I think that decision later when Alina wants her scar removed, that makes that feel like really major. Ooh, she's like crossing a barrier that she won't be able to go back through. Archie's performance in this episode was so good. Mal waking up and finding his friend's dead was like gut-wrenching. It's like literally one of the hardest scenes in this whole show. All right, now episode 5, Show Me Who You Are, the Winter Fate Baby. I love this episode. I love the crows sneaking in. I love Kaz's disguise. How do you do, fellow soldiers? This is also the episode where we meet David the Fabricator. Love him. He's a really compelling character in the books because he's one of those that you just like sense that he's just gotten swept up in something. I think the casting initially threw me because I'm like, cool, Freddy from Skins, how's he gonna play David? And the answer is like a little dork, which is perfect. I also like that they included the gloves and included Alina not becoming dependent on them, because you know, this is a TV show, you're kind of pressed for time. We get that moment of like, oh, she's understanding her own powers and she's self-sufficient in them without having the whole plot line of, oh, I need the gloves, actually no I don't. Jesper, very fun. This is the kind of like whimsy that I want if the crows are whimsical, is just Jesper going on side quests that involve him charming people. We also get, referencing back to Zoya in her weird racist comment in the previous episode, we have the part where Inej is doing her acrobatic thing, and one of the party guests says she's Zemeni, and Zoya is walking by and goes, she's Suli. I just think that's really cool, and that's a very Zoya moment. She's a bitch with a purpose. But it also kind of tees up in the final episode when Zoya and Inej kind of join forces. It was my initial reading the first time I watched it. Subsequent watches, I don't think it's the case as much, but it's worth noting to me that like Zoya and Inej never like introduce themselves to each other. They just like have this one like secondhand interaction, and then in the second to last and last episode, or is it just the last episode, I think, they, you know, team up and immediately work together. So I thought that was implying that they knew each other, like previously, when Inej knows Zoya's name right off the bat. But maybe that's just me reading into that. I don't know. I also love when Alina and the Darkling are doing their little like display thing. There's a look exchange between Fedyor and Genya, which I think is very cool because that obviously becomes really important in subsequent books. So I really like little moments like that that are like, they could be nothing or they could be helping to tell more story later on, enriching the story later on. So I really liked that. The Mal versus the Darkling moment in like the map room or whatever, it was also great. Because, you know, we're starting to get that sense, if you didn't already, by everything about him and his demeanor, that the Darkling's motivations may not be completely pure and he might be manipulating Alina or something. And that is something I wanted to talk about in this episode when we find out the truth. Baghra is the Darkling's mother. The Darkling is the Black Heretic. He doesn't want to destroy the fold. He wants to basically enslave Alina. Like, we get all of that, and it's a little telegraphed. It just felt so abrupt in the book. And again, maybe that's just because I didn't see it coming, but you're 2/3 of the way through the book, and then suddenly, off of one woman's word, Alina's like, shit, you're probably right, and like bolts. So like when I read it, I was like, do we know Baghra's telling the truth? So I liked that there were some more obvious warning signs, such as the Darkling getting Mal to tell him what Alina's favorite flower is. Episode 6, The Heart is an Arrow. Arkin, not a crow, will never be a crow, doesn't have it in him. Once again, the flashbacks are doing too much. They're doing too much. I love when Alina and Jesper have like a Western standoff. Like, even the way the camera's framed, it looks like they're both about to like, and I think that's fun. I think it's very funny when the Darkling is informed that Alina has left the small palace, and he's like, I just really don't think she would leave with them. When like 2 episodes ago, she was cracking jokes about escaping the palace. It's not that out of left field. Nina and Matthias having their like romance novel moment. It's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted when I found out that these two were going to be in this show. And we're getting the events that precede Six of Crows for them. I like that. This is perfect. Done well. And now I want to talk a little more about Mal now. I like Mal, and I'm kind of here and there on this decision to make him more accepting of Alina's powers right out of the gate. I think it is kind of important to his character that, you know, he has a starting point and he is kind of distrustful of Alina's powers. So that, I think, maybe like is undermining his development a little bit in the way that's like, oh, he's actually just like super on board immediately. It's like, oh, okay, well. And again, in a TV show, you're kind of pressed for time, so I don't know. Here and there, like I said. I do like, however, that he's not like an insane, crazy, jealous person, which is, I think that's healthy, and that's good. Then we go back to the crows, and again, something that just is played serious but feels so silly in the moment is Kaz just like performing close-up magic in the middle of a conversation to illustrate a point. It's just a little goofy. It's just a little goofy. Come on. The whole sequence of the Darkling and co looking for the crows is another standout kind of action set piece. I love the Jesper versus Ivan because it's like 2 poles of the personality spectrum, and then we get the little allusions about Jesper maybe having some kind of special ability, and we also get, you know, Jesper and the crows overall, they're criminals with a code. Like, he's not gonna, you know, execute this guy, and he's certainly not gonna do it in front of a kid. I mean, it's a low bar, but it is a bar. Also, the eternal question of who would win in a fight, the Darkling or Kaz Brekker, and the answer, of course, was staring us in the face the whole time, which is the Darkling would attack Kaz, and Kaz would somehow use, again, Vegas magic to disappear in a cloud of smoke. I like that the cut is used, and like they kind of are like, ooh, that's spooky when he does do it, but we're not making too much of a thing of it yet. We're like, ooh, hey, Alina, you should learn to use the cut. So I like how that's handled overall in the whole show. Did the crows just like GTA the Darkling's carriage? Because if so, that is hilarious. Episode 7, The Unsee. This whole beginning flashback with the Darkling is too long. It's too long. I think it's interesting and even positive and a net good for the show that we see the Darkling's motive and we like get that moment of how powerful he is, that he was able to create the fold in a moment of rage. However, this scene went on way too long. I also love the Jesper and Inej moment. I think that's really great. We get a little more hinting at Inej's past. I love their dynamic. I really liked this scene. I was robbed of a Mal versus Zoya fight. I think that would have been sick, but also I know that Zoya would have put Mal on his ass so quickly that it would not have made compelling television, I think. Also, how many times has Mal had like a life-threatening wound on this show? It's a lot of times. The Inej and Kaz scene is also very good. However, I was reading, at this point, when I was watching the show, I was reading the very end of Six of Crows, and that whole speech about like crows remember people, that's from the very end of Crooked Kingdom. I like that we wanted more of a character moment, more of a relationship moment between Kaz and Inej, but it's like, you know, if we're just stripping the Six of Crows books for parts, like this is gonna wear pretty thin pretty quickly. When David and the Darkling put the collar on Alina, that looked fucking gnarly. That looked really, really cool, but also, hello Hannibal. Again, the scene with the Darkling and Mal in the tent. I'm just gonna, this whole time I've been calling him the Darkling, I'm not gonna call him Kirigan. Like, I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, I love that whole scene, all the scenes that they share, because I think it is because the actors have such a good rapport. All of their scenes together are spectacular. And we got a little bit of that like book Mal flavor that I wanted, that he's like a little proud and a little hard-headed, and his whole thing is less about like winning Alina as like he just does not like the Darkling and does not like seeing him have any advantage at all. There's the scene where the crows are basically scamming their way onto the ship, and Kaz and Jesper like knock out the two Zemeni guards at the same time in silhouette. I just love that. I love that. Milo the goat again. Sure. Milo ex machina. Why not? This is also the episode where we get the famous Darkling line, make me your villain. He literally says it with tears in his eyes, and I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. Also, is this episode supposed to be an origin story on No Mourners, No Funerals? If not, I wish they kind of would have been saying it the whole time, because I don't think I need like an origin story on this kind of nonsense phrase that just sounds cool. But also I think they would have been using it the whole time if this wasn't what that was, so who knows. In episode 8, the finale, No Mourners. Ooh. And again, with the books, it's been like probably 2 months now since I read Shadow and Bone, the first book, so I don't remember shit about shit, but did Zoya have family in Novosibirsk? Because if so, okay, but if not, then that was a really good call. Because we need to kind of plant the seeds of Zoya being like, fuck this guy. And then when we find Nina and Matthias again, they are holed up. We get the moment of Matthias looking at the wolf. But I was so confused at first when, Fedor's around the corner dropping his blood pressure. And I was like, what is he doing? Is he like choking? I was so confused. And again, that's a very big moment, is Nina literally turning her back on the Ravkan Second Army for Matthias. Oh, God, I love him. And then Mal and Kaz back on the skiff. immediately, like, shaking hands meme. Like, the attack on Novosibirsk is gnarly. I think it's not as gnarly as it is in the book because, again, if memory serves, in the book, Novosibirsk is just like a fishing village that happens to be close to the fold that the Darklings saw as disposable, which is horrific. I also just think that it's interesting, you know, that Zlatan politically was in favor of the preservation of the fold because that kind of delineated East and West Ravka and would have helped their bid for sovereignty. This is also the episode, as I mentioned earlier, that Zoya and Inej are kind of like instant friends, which very well may be. It could be like a Maz and Cal situation where it's just like real recognizes real, but also, I don't know. Again, I'm probably just reading into that too much. And so much has been made of Kaz, like, escaping the Darkling earlier, but I think we're glossing over the fact that Inej Gaffa literally stabs the Darkling in the chest. That's great. Why aren't we talking about that more? And then Kaz, in the big final battle scene, he just uses his Party City cane to just hit a Volcra in the head. Which is really, like, okay. Thank you for participating, Kaz. There's also a moment here that I love, because it's like, when you know what's going on, it seems like a really obvious, like, almost giveaway. But when you don't know what's going on, it's just like a cool moment, is when Alina, you know, I think Mal is unconscious, and Alina grabs his hand and she literally sees the stag, and it's like everyone else on the ship disappears and it's just her and the stag. When she grabs Mal's hand, he's an amplifier. It's so good. Jesper keeps quipping. We're reaching kind of a dangerous density of quips. Luckily, Kit delivers them very well. I also like that earlier Mal, his line about, like, I never said I was smart, and then he just football tackles the Darkling. So good. Their fight scene is really good. And also, if we get, like, bloopers of any scene in this show, I hope it's the Mal and Darkling fight scene, because I feel like they were having a grand old time filming that. And then we reach kind of the ending bit, the whole scene when they're around the fire. I didn't love it. It just kind of felt like they had to button up a lot of stuff really quickly and just get everything where they need it to be when they leave off. And then Kaz saying he'll just pay off Inej's indenture. And I'm like, seriously? That's really important to both her as a character and their relationship, is that she's kind of always not completely sure where she stands with Kaz, what his motivations are, and a huge part of that is her indenture. So she doesn't know how much of that is his dedication to her, or how much is, you know, protecting his investment. And Zoya explicitly telling Alina, you need new allies. And I'm like, Nikolai? We have our last bit with Nina and Matthias when he is in the cage and he immediately attacks Nina, which he does in Hellgate too, which is like, is this just going to be a Pavlovian response now? I hope not. Then when the crows are kind of like unpacking, what did we learn? And Jesper says that greed is a poor motivator. And I'm like, it's literally like the opposite. When Jesper says that greed is a poor motivator, I'm like, they actually make a thing of it in Six of Crows that greed is a very compelling motivator for Kaz. It's his servant and lever. Also, yeah, Nina kind of meeting the gang on the boat is very interesting, because it's like are they skipping the whole Nina goes to the White Rose thing? Or maybe she'll just be like a deep implant there, kind of like how it is in the book where she like works there, but she does odd jobs for the crows. Or maybe they might be skipping that wholesale, which might work. I don't see why not. And then, of course, the Darkling staggering out of the fold with the walking Volcra. What are they called? The Nishivoya? Something like that. Imagine if we don't get a season 2 and that's just how the show ends. Like all this stuff about like friendship and like hope for the future and good will prevail, and it's actually the bad guy you just beat, he's stronger now, actually. Like, imagine if that was the ending. So yeah, that was the show. Just some kind of final thoughts. The crows did feel a little tacked on, because they were. Like, you could have done all of the Shadow and Bone stuff without any Six of Crows stuff, and it would have been the same. But I mean, that's going to be natural when you have something like Shadow and Bone with these, like, big stakes, like, a war is going on, and there's armies, generals, and then Six of Crows, which is just like, we need to break into jail. So, yeah, that, their plot is naturally going to seem like kind of small potatoes compared to Shadow and Bone, which is fine. And while I do appreciate the inclusion of the crows, like, when I first even found out about the show, and then it was going to be a Shadow and Bone show, and I was like, really? Like, I appreciate that they're included, but their whole plot basically is summed up as they get a job, go to Ravka, try to get the Sun Summoner, decide not to, and go home. As far as like language and accent, I know that's so important in the books. I totally understand why it's like, we can't have Kirch and Ravkin be two different languages like that. That's just absurd. That would have added so many problems into the plot of this show that were not worth it for like the reality of the world building. So that's fine. So I know they had like old Ravkin in a scene or two, and then Fjerdan, which is like kind of broadly Germanic sounding. It almost sounds like English a lot of the time, honestly. But yeah, I think I saw somewhere that they were constructing like 3 conlangs, so I'm like, maybe Shu is the 3rd one, but we shall see. But yeah, that's something I actually really love about the books, is how important language and accent is. And then finally, kind of just, how are we gonna go forward? That's my biggest thing with the inclusion of the crows. It's like, how are we going to sustain this where they, you know, play both a substantive role and their characters actually like do something without like completely undermining the Six of Crows books? I'm just not sure. I mean, it can be done, probably. So one possibility is that, you know, some time is going to elapse, and then maybe they'll do like Six of Crows at the same time as Siege and Storm. But again, like, I could see the Jurda Param storyline being a part of the war, but it's also like, wouldn't that be hugely distracting for the Darkling? Like, all this talk of amplifiers, and there's just like a drug and one dude who knows how to engineer it. Like, imagine if the Darkling was involved in the events of Six of Crows. That would have been horrific, and they would have all likely died. So they probably wouldn't do anything with Jurda Param, which means they wouldn't really be doing the Ice Court heist. If there's no Ice Court heist, there's not going to be any Wylan yet, so I'm not holding my breath on Wylan. I am holding my breath on Nikolai, but I'm not holding my breath on Wylan. My official guess is that the crows are gonna kind of be put on ice. They might be like lightly featured doing barrel crimes. Maybe they hear word about some drug that can influence Grisha powers, but I just don't see how they're gonna keep doing stuff with the crows for as long as the events of Shadow and Bone. But yeah, that's kind of my official guess. I'm very curious as to, you know, Inej. I feel like her whole backstory and her whole motivation's getting rearranged a lot. The crows, I have no idea. I just feel like the crows and Alina and Mal are never gonna overlap again. That's just my thoughts. So yeah, thank you for watching. I've been filming for like an hour and a half. This is gonna be a nightmare to edit. Yeah, I'll be back soon with an April reading wrap up. I'm still working my way through King of Scars, so maybe I'll have more opinions on the show and I'll watch it again. I don't need to watch it again. So yeah, that's my thoughts after watching all of Shadow and Bone 3 times in 1 week. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.